Yeah, no kidding, Kirk. Thanks for the tip. Although I obviously was recording the call, I don't actually remember the rest of the phone call that well. I have Shatner's words and mine, but what I was doing with my baby while trying to talk to Captain Kirk is less clear. I do know that as I struggled with the bottle, Shatner continued to give me orders, becoming an on-the-spot parenting coach over the phone. Time began to blur, and I think for a moment I was caught between dimensions, kind of like Kirk was in the Tholian web. On the one hand, I was on the phone with my childhood. On the other hand, I was holding my child. From 1990 to 1992, I was Spock for Halloween 3 years in a row. I was never Captain Kirk, because I never really identified with him. I loved Kirk, but to me, Kirk was like somebody's dad. Spock felt closer to a friend, a cipher for the ways I could deal with whatever emotional trouble the universe threw at me. During my Shatner call, at some point I walked to the living room and noticed a faded photograph of myself in 3rd grade, dressed as Spock. I'm not smiling in this picture. No way. I'm Spock. My mom has wedged the store-bought plastic Vulcan ears to the sides of my head as best she can. She's penciled on the requisite upswept eyebrows, which look great on Spock, but just make a little kid look like a permanently angry Peanuts character. She's dyed my blonde hair midnight black, but Mom didn't have to worry about doing the Spock haircut. I'm a 3rd grade kid in 1990, so I've got that bowl cut anyway. In Star Trek's only true Halloween episode, 1967's Catspaw, Captain Kirk says Spock would be a natural for Trick or Treat, accidentally predicting a go-to costume not only for me, but for millions of people for over 5 decades. We never found out what Spock really thought about the human holiday of Halloween, but my 3rd grade self believes he'd be down to study the strange human rituals from the ground level. Spock finds this stuff comforting because experiencing human banalities just reaffirms that he's above all that shit. In this photo, I see my plastic trick-or-treat pumpkin sitting at my feet because I'm clasping my hands behind my back. That's the way Spock holds his hands in one of the famous photographs I had tacked up in my bedroom. He's pictured standing like this on one of the covers of so many of the dog-eared paperbacks that dominate my childhood home library. He stands this way in my favorite movie at the time, The Wrath of Khan, usually when he's about to say something awesome like, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." Little kids with nervous energy never know what to do with their hands. Spock taught us all how to relax, or more accurately, to look like we're relaxed. What Spock taught me, and millions of others, was a badass version of fake it till you make it. But Star Trek isn't just an adult version of Care Bears. Its fictional world is about more than fluffy clouds and hope. Star Trek's power is in its humanist strategy. In order to live long and prosper, we must admit we're flawed. We are what we are, Captain Picard says in the 1987 debut episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, but we're doing the best we can. This sentiment describes all of us. From people struggling to get through the day, to the quest to find the perfect balance of mental health and the achievement of personal goals, to those of us holding babies, to those of us who just want justice and peace in our time. The world is not easy, but the heroes of Star Trek constantly provide us new tactics to rethink not just how we can succeed, but sometimes to alter the way we define that success. As a piece of journalism, my 2018 phone call with William Shatner may have been a failure, but it was a victory in another way. I remembered that my professional life and my childhood love of Star Trek were connected. Something that was once a place for imagination and intellectual refuge was now a building block of my life. My daughter's life literally couldn't have existed without William Shatner, without Star Trek. In The Wrath of Khan, Kirk says, "I don't believe in the no-win scenario," positing the notion that failure may not exist if we reframe the conditions of the test. In 2020, speaking to the official Star Trek podcast, The Pod Directive, Stacey Abrams pointed out that her inspiration in politics came from an episode of The Next Generation called Peak Performance. In it, the android Lieutenant Commander Data, Brent Spiner, plays a complicated and silly-looking strategy game called Stratagema. Although Data is a super-intelligent android, he is still bested by his alien opponent in this game. Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, comforts Data, saying, "It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness, that is life." Abrams said she drew great inspiration from this episode because Data is compelled to investigate how he frames winning. Data wasn't going to play by the general notion of defeating the other person, but he was playing to stay in the game, Abrams said. That was the responsibility I had as Democratic leader. We weren't going to always win, but we had to stay competitive. Star Trek's famous catchphrase, "Live long and prosper," doesn't evoke a belief in magic or a quasi-religious faith in a mystical energy field controlling your destiny. It's more about staying in the game.